This is The Download from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Newton Shuttlecotty.
And I'm Gavin Gaddis.
The Download is brought to you by Podscribe. Find out more at podscribe.com.
This week, Sounds Profitable's latest research, Ad Nauseam. Signal Hill Insights finds people with side hustles love podcasts. Research finds advertisers are misinformed about misinformation. And Spotify video podcast uploads get a wider release. Let's get started.
This Wednesday, Sounds Profitable debuted their latest research conducted with Signal Hill Insights. The study, titled Ad Nauseam, surveyed 1,011 weekly podcast listeners to gauge how they react to podcast ads. When consumers enjoy ads, they're effective. 58% of respondents say they discovered a product or service they liked through a podcast ad, and 45% say they made a purchase because of a podcast ad. When asked how they reacted to ads in the last podcast episode they listened to, 68% of respondents listened to at least some of them. 51% find hearing the same ad more than once in a single episode annoying or strongly dislike it. When it comes to skipping podcast ads, 46% of listeners say they always or often skip ads on podcasts. In the webinar debuting Ad Nauseam, Tom Webster notes that there is a tendency for survey respondents to exaggerate their actual behavior when asked such questions as a hypothetical. This is demonstrated by a follow-up question asking respondents to think of the last podcast episode they listened to that had ads and to select how they reacted to those ads. When associating the answer with a specific lived experience, the numbers changed noticeably. 68% of respondents listened to the ads, with only 27% reporting they skipped or ignored the ads. The study found listeners don't find interesting, funny, or novel ads fatiguing. They do find a lack of variety in form and repetition of the same brand or message tiresome. In the words of Tom Webster during the study's debut webinar, quote, "Podcast listeners don't skip ads, they skip crap," end quote.
This Tuesday from Paul Riesmandel at Signal Hill Insights. In recent years, Signal Hill has found more business-to-business and general advertisers aiming to connect with small business owners, heretofore referred to as SBOs. In the process of doing background research to determine the most relevant research design, SHI discovered conventional ideas about what counts as an SBO are being challenged by contemporary realities. When small business owners are brought up, they commonly call to mind visions of small restaurants, retail stores, or landscaping businesses. But what about rideshare service drivers, Airbnb hosts, or people selling goods on third-party marketplaces like Amazon and Etsy? A quote from Riesmandel, quote, "Depending on how revenue scales, many of these side hustles are, or close to becoming, full-blown small businesses. The U.S. Small Business Administration only defines a small business by maximum, not minimum, revenue. And the Census Bureau reports 54% have fewer than one employee. There's a strong case to be made that side hustles qualify," end quote. With that in mind, the side hustle owner's relationship with podcasting is a good one for advertisers to consider. According to the Spring 2024 podcast download conducted by Signal Hill Insights and Cumulus Media, 43% of weekly podcast listeners have a side hustle to supplement their primary job's income. If filtered down to younger participants in the 18 to 34 demographic, that number jumps to 60%. Men, heavy podcast consumers, and active video podcast watchers also over-index in comparison to the overall podcast audience when it comes to having a gig on the side. Riesmandel presents this information as the perspective that podcasts are clearly reaching a strong audience of younger entrepreneurs and small business owners at the early stages of running those businesses. Brands looking to get their products in front of traditional business owners have a new niche to consider. As Riesmandel says in the article, even if someone's side hustle doesn't need business insurance today, one would still want their brand to be top of mind the minute they do need business insurance.
This Wednesday from Anthony Vargas at AdExchanger. Since 2019, a group of researchers from Carnegie Mellon and Stanford have been looking into how ads are served to sites that publish misleading stories, propaganda, or conspiracy theories. In addition, the group looks into whether advertisers accurately understand the issue of misinformation and advertising's role. The study is built from data analysis of over 9 million ads placed on 5,485 websites by 42,595 unique advertisers. This includes over 1,200 sites that industry watchdog organizations like NewsGuard and Global Disinformation had labeled as publishing misinformation. According to their report, between 2019 and 2021, 2/3 of advertisers bought ads on sites that had been previously flagged by watchdogs. In a follow-up survey, the researchers found only 20% of advertising executives from those companies believed their company had purchased such inventory. The report calls this a sense of, quote, false uniqueness, end quote. Advertisers tend to be aware that monetizing misinformation is a problem, but there's a common perception that it's a problem because other brands are buying the ads, not their own company. When it comes to potential solutions, the researchers propose several options, including industry-wide disclosures of whose ads appear on shady sites, or public rankings based on how effectively brands avoid misinformation sites.
This Monday from James Cridland at Pod News. Back in June of 2023, Spotify debuted the ability for podcasts not hosted on Spotify for Podcasters, formerly known as Anchor, to upload video episodes. Cridland reports the feature is now more widely available thanks to a partial rollout of the feature last week, which now includes several podcasts under the Pod News umbrella. Much like YouTube Video, the system does not use RSS. Video podcasts are hosted on Spotify servers, so all analytics will live within Spotify dashboards, while nothing goes back to a podcast host. Of course, host-reliant features like dynamic ad insertion will also not work. Cridland conducted a test by uploading a video version of a Pod News Weekly Review episode in which he edited the introductory jingle to add a phrase denoting one is listening to the audio of a video version. After uploading, nobody involved with Pod News could get the non-video version of the audio to play, even if listening to the podcast purely as audio, thus indicating that if one does upload video versions of their podcasts, Spotify's player will default to using the video's audio even if RSS audio exists. Finally, it's time for our quick hits. These are articles that didn't quite make the cut for today's episode, but are still worth including in your weekend reading. This week, The Podcast Opportunity for Food and Beverage Brands by Tom Webster. While some food and beverage brands have had success with podcasting, the field remains largely untapped opportunity for the industry. Odyssey, cross-platform audio listeners boost results for advertisers. A study finding cross-platform listeners, which is those who consume audio across multiple formats and mediums, tend to make purchases based on audio ads. How Brands Are Doing with Their Podcast Businesses by Kaiwen Yan. A look into the current state of global brands debuting podcasts in China. Next, Apple is quietly replacing SK Ad Network and PCM with a new ad attribution framework. Apple's previous ad attribution tech is now rebranded and filed under the Ad Attribution Kit umbrella. And finally, IAB's Gavilan sees symbiotic future for connected TV and podcasting. A Beat TV interview highlighting the similarities between CTV and podcast advertising's growth and challenges faced going forward.
And that was The Download, brought to you by Sounds Profitable. I know we went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to every article mentioned right in your podcast listening app or on the download section of soundsprofitable.com. And thank you for sticking with us as we bring you the top stories you might have missed from the past week. I'm Newton Shuttlecotty.
And I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Barletta, Newton Shuttlecotty, and Tom Webster. Special thanks to Spreaker for hosting The Download, and thank you for joining us. Robot?
Download complete.